All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for showing up for today's class. Let me just very quickly catch you all up on where we are. We had to miss last week. I sincerely apologize for that because I didn't realize that there was a day off last Thursday. So anyway, just to kind of catch you up on our course, the weekly topics. We are supposed to be in week 4 right now, but we are doing week 3's topic because we missed last week. Yeah. But if you notice from the course structure in the proforma, which is available on UKM Folio in the first section, topic for week 3 and week 4 are overlapping. The corpus is slightly different, a short story or a novel. But for the purpose of our tutorial discussion, class discussion, we are focusing on the return as our standard corpus. Okay, so for this week, so what's going to happen is I'm going to push video essay by another week. So instead of video essay being next week, which is week 5, we are 1 week back. So right now we are technically still week 3. So next week we will still expand on the discussion of MLE and its authors, but I will also use the opportunity to discuss your first assignment, which is the video essay. So be prepared for the video essay assignment for next week to discuss, to discuss and to prepare. Now, which means your video essay, which is supposed to be week 5, is now going to be week 6. Okay, is that all right?
Yes, yes, all right.
Yes,
so I will talk more about the video essay next week, but suffice to say, I just want you to get started and thinking about your assignments. That's why I give you the topics in advance. There is no e-task for the next couple of weeks. So use the opportunity to prepare for your first assignment, the video essay. And the question is already given to you. The question is, conduct a review of literature in the area of Malaysian literary canon. Choose any topic or Malaysian text and do a literary review. What literary review means is not original research. You are not asked to do an original research. You are asked to survey what research has been done in this area, previous research that has been done either in the area or in the area in the Malaysian text of your choice. For instance, if you are interested about K.S. Maniam's The Return, this assignment allows you to conduct a literature review survey of past research by scholars in this field on K.S. Maniam's The Return. So you do a lot of library research, journal survey, Googling, yeah? So this first assignment is a literature review assignment, not an original research assignment. The original research that you will be conducting will be for assignment 2 and for the final assignment, where you have to conduct an actual textual analysis of text or writer that you are interested to explore. But for assignment 1, you don't need to do an original research, which means you don't need a methodology, you don't need to identify a corpus or a writer's work that you want to study. You don't need to do that. For this assignment, you need to be reading other people's research in the area of Malaysian literature in English. So that's why in the reading list, in the Proforma reading list, the bits in orange from number 1 till number 5 here, that's an example of, those are some of the examples of critical works done by other scholars in the area of Malaysian literature in English. Okay, so you can use any of these. You can use others as well. I will teach you at the end how to, at the end of the class, today's class, how to locate critical works done in the area of Malaysian literature in English, so that next week you can tell me which article you are interested to review for your first assignment. Okay, so I'm just going to give you certain things right now to think about, because as we are going through the class, you will have questions, and if you've got questions, write them down, and inshallah at the end of today's session we can go through some of your immediate concerns, and then next week we will continue with this topic, and then after that I will address your assignment 1 concerns. Is that all right?
Yes, Doctor.
All right.
Okay, Doctor.
So I
Sorry, Doctor.
proceed. Yes.
In order not to be forgotten, I think that the session not recorded yet.
Oh, really?
I think so.
I know it's recorded.
I thought it was recorded. It
Yeah,
is.
it was recorded.
It is recorded, inshallah.
Okay.
But thank you for looking out for us. Yeah. Okay, so so let's start with today's session. I'm looking at a particular writer and his particular corpus, and the writer is K.S. Maniam, and the corpus is his first novel called The Return. This is the book cover, the original book cover of The Return. A few of you have already started exploring on K.S. Maniam, finding out a little bit about his background. So 2 weeks back, you heard some of your classmates introducing K.S. Maniam. So I'm not going to go into the details of it. So suffice to note that, number 1, K.S. Maniam was an Indian Malaysian. What that means is his family came from India and settled in Malaya during colonial times, and he lived in the areas of Bidong Kedah, which is up north, north from where we. Oh, good Lord, we're not all here together. North, north part of Peninsular Malaysia. And he lived for the larger part of his childhood as well as young adulthood in the estates. And we'll explore more this concept of living in the estates, especially within the concept called plural society, and what that means to identity formation in the Malayan context. Okay, so a few things. But before that, let's just kind of, so these are some of the topics that I'm going to cover: identity construction, Malaysian literature in English, plural society, and colonial legacy. But before that, some of the key things that we discussed from the last class, I need to reiterate a few things that we discussed because there was a gap, a 2 weeks gap. So one of the things that we talked about is this idea of social reality. Professor Shamsul Amri Baharuddin talks about everyday defined social reality and authority defined social reality. Can somebody recap the difference between the two? What is everyday defined social reality? What is authority defined reality? Can somebody define that for me? Just in your own words, what you understood.
I think, Doctor.
Yes, please, Alice.
Yeah, I think the social reality is our daily life. People surrounding us, and what they do, what they think, and the authority reality is the government and the party who take power.
Well said. I need you to, you know, understand this idea of, let's see what color shall I choose. Can you see the color?
Yes, doctor.
Jenna?
Yes, doctor.
I want it to be darker. Can I make it darker? I'm exploring, trying to. Oh no, okay, never mind. Back to pen. Okay. So this notion of social reality. Social reality is a construct. Okay. So what does the word construct mean? Construct. What does that mean? Is that natural? Is that biologically available? Is that man-made? Is that natural? What do you understand from the word construct?
It means to build the construct of the text.
Again, Ali, I missed the first part.
Doctor, it's mean to make or to build the content of the text.
To make or to build?
Yes.
Is that what? Yeah. So to make or to build. So to make or to build, that means it's not natural. It is artificial. It is something that man creates. Man makes it. Right? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when we talk about a construct like social reality, Ali, Husna and Jennifer and myself, we are in scattered different parts of Peninsular Malaysia. If we looked out the window and described our social reality to each other, will it be the same? Will it be the same?
No.
No. It will be different, right? So the elements of construct needs to be defined. We need to define what we all mean by social reality so that we have the same kind of measuring device. Whenever we talk about social reality, we know what we're talking about. We know what this construct means to all of us. So that's why concepts like author-defined social reality, everyday defined social reality, authority-defined social reality. All these concepts needs to be defined so that the construct has a more objective measuring for everybody. So we can approach this construct from any point of view and we can all agree what it means. So that's the first thing I want you to kind of like keep in mind. When we deal with analysis, textual analysis, we are dealing with a lot of the use of concepts, theoretical concepts. These concepts need to be defined, all right? You need to define these concepts and that makes your methodology. So that's the method how I will analyze the text that I want to study. All right. So that's the first thing that I need you to understand. This notion of author-defined social reality is defined by this person called Raihana MM back in 2009. So somebody else may define the author's role in the creation of literary works from a different point of view. That will be another construct, right? But it has to have a clear definition, has to have clear parameters, a structure, in order for somebody else to understand, oh, this is what she means, or this is what he means when they talk about social reality. Are you following me so far?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Husna, I need to hear your voice once in a while, otherwise I'm not sure whether you're with us.
Yes, I'm following.
Okay, brilliant. So when we talk about Malaysian literature in English, when we talk about K.S. Maniam's works or any writer's works, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what do I want to study in this text? What do I want to study? So one of the things to do is to identify some concepts, theoretical concepts that you can use to study the novel. Okay, so that's the first thing I need to kind of get out there. And then the next thing that we talked about in weeks 1 and 2, we talked about how each writer positions himself or herself based on their own conceived social reality. So I gave you examples from Muhammad Haji Saleh, K.S. Maniam and Lloyd Fernando. I gave you excerpts by these writers, and based on the excerpts in week 2, I asked you what was the writer trying to emphasize. And that aspect defines to an extent the author's social reality. If you remember, Muhammad Haji Saleh talks about a poet, what it means to be a poet with a social kind of a mission. K.S. Maniam talked about this collective consciousness and how work of fiction kind of helped complete the human experience. And Lloyd Fernando talks about the good writer, quote unquote, the good writer, what that means, you know, what's a definition of a good writer. So all these things are constructs that the writer, the poet defines in order for him or her to understand and to convey to people, this is my role as the writer. Okay, so that's the second thing that we talked about or dealt with. The third, which is going to be ongoing, which is super crucial, is this notion of the relationship between text and context. Okay, and that's where we take off today's class. We will take off from this third point. Okay, so this issue that every text that you read is within a kind of a parameter, within a kind of a frame. So imagine this is a picture. Oh dear me, can't have blue on blue, can you? Okay. So imagine this is a picture. Now, if I drew the picture of a tree on its own, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like it doesn't look as if it exists anywhere significant. But I need to give it a kind of a context. I need to give it some kind of a frame. You know, I need to kind of like create a kind of a context in order for the picture that I'm trying to draw to make sense, to tell a story, to mean something to the readers. So that's what the context is. Okay? What we talk about context, it means a lot of things, one of which is historical context. It's like what episodes of history helps me understand the story better. Okay, so that's one context. Another context is elements of society. What kind of society is this? Is this multicultural society, monocultural society? What's the demographic? What are the different cultures in this society? So the elements, the social elements help define the text. Connected to that, culture. What elements of culture is embedded in this text? When we start to explore K.S. Maniam's The Return, in chapter 1, you will see all three of these and more. He will even have a religious context, the religion as a context in itself. All right. So when you're reading writers whose sense of social reality is defined by their culture, by their religion, by their history, by their gender, by their ethnicity, by their nationality, these writers' social reality will also appear in their writing. Okay, so understanding that the text that you read is created, it's framed within a context, is like a big help to get into the story. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
So basically I'm saying the first thing to do is, in order to crack the codes that's in the story, in order to find out what this story is really about, is to ask yourself, as well as ask the writer, what other context helps inform me of this story? Okay, so I give you an example. What I mean by this. This is partly from my PhD research. So the inverted commas and stuff, it's taken from my PhD research or from references that I was using. So just to kind of expand this discussion of text and context. First statement to kind of think about and probe over is this quote by Paul. It says, literature, like any form of arts, is a creative depiction of a country. I mean, you may agree, you may disagree. I mean, if you're reading a text written by an American writer, does that text, Steinbeck, Hemingway, Alice Walker, does that text depict the country, or does that text depict the writer's perception of the country? So you can kind of argue with this, So think of writers that you are familiar with, either from your own country or just your favorite writers, whoever your favorite writers are, or poets or playwrights. Whatever that writer produced, is it fair to say that that work of art is a depiction of his or her country, the writer's country? So that's the first, every time you read people's opinion, like this, when you do a literature review, when you're reading people's opinions, critiques' opinions, you always have to engage. You have to ask yourself, do I agree? Do I disagree? Yes or no? Do I agree? Do I disagree? Is this a statement that I can agree with? Or is this a statement that I feel is exaggerated or doesn't really depict, it doesn't really represent my position? So I want you to kind of have an opinion whenever you read these things. Moving on. Paul kind of continues that some would argue that literature has the responsibility to ensure that the nation is reflected, in its work. That means Malaysia is reflected in the works of K.S. Maniam. The Corpse Washer is a reflection of Iraq by Sinan Anton. And any writer that you are familiar with, would it be fair to say that the writer's responsibility is to reflect his nation in his writing? I need you to kind of think about that, because for Malaysian literature in English, especially the first and the second generation writers, this was the case. They kind of saw it as a responsibility, and they took it seriously in the way they approached their craft. Okay, so it was more like literature for society, not just literature for pleasure, literature for personal growth. This is more art for, it's not for art's sake, but art for, the greater good of society. And what I did was, when I was doing my PhD and I probed this discussion, I came up with this construct that literature has a kind of agency, has a literary agency, which means that literature can actually make a difference in society, and we have fictions that has been banned by countries. Fatwas has been declared on certain novels and certain works of art because it was considered blasphemous, or it was considered sensitive to the nation's well-being. So literature is not just words on paper, people just read for the fun of it. It actually can affect nations. It can actually affect people's imagination and psychological development. Catcher in the Rye, the novel by the American writer, was known to have caused quite a lot of rebellious attitudes in America, during the time. People felt they were inspired, moved when they read the book and made certain decisions in their life. So works of art can create and can inspire revolution. So to say that literature is just printed words, it doesn't mean anything, doesn't make any difference, is wrong, I think. But the question I'm asking is, do we have to give the writer that huge responsibility to represent society in his works of art? Or do we say the writer has a choice to kind of do whatever he or she feels is appropriate? So you will have a chance in your first assignment to raise your position as the reader. What's your position when it comes to reading literature? Do you feel that the writer has to be made responsible? If I am a novelist, should I listen to what the nation wants me to do, or should I be given the independence, the autonomy to write accordingly? So that's something we will probe in the next few weeks. Please let me know if you have issues, if you got questions, just unmute and then just ask me immediately, okay?
Okay.
Any questions so far?
No, doctor. Okay.
No,
Okay.
doctor.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we move further. So what's the context that makes up a text? First of all, like I said, historical context. So that's the first thing that you need to keep in mind. When you read a text, always ask yourself, which time frame is this? So we talk about setting, right? So when you read a novel, setting is one of the important things that will help you understand the story. So when we talk about setting, we talk about time and we talk about place. Time would be the historical part. Place would be which part of the world is this story set in. All right, so authors use this part of history and revisions that episode. So we're reading fiction, we're not reading historical books, we're reading fiction. So what the author does is revisions that historical episode for a certain purpose, to show something, to give a certain significance for that element of history. It stays true to history, but it gives a different dimension than the historical books or in the history books. So the reader's task, you and I as the reader, our job, if you like, is to do this, to discover and respond to the text, and then to discover what effect the author's revisioning has done in the retelling of the nation's history. I will demonstrate this with the return. Okay, before that, let's take a short break and do task 2, task 2. You were given a job to a task to identify an episode of Malaysian history, to identify any episodes of Malaysian history. So I would like to hear from some of you. Who would like to go first?
I can go first, doctor.
All right, cool. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay.
Okay, which episode of Malaysian history did you identify?
1969. I think
Cool.
Malaysians will be familiar with this. Can
Okay.
you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will use the present mode. So, hello everybody. For the e-task 2, I will be choosing 1969, the year of 1969 in Malaysia. So, based on the text, the reference, doctor, that you asked us to read the chronological year, I took it out. So, as far as we know from there, 1969, 13 May, is the so-called May 13 tragedy in Malaysia. So what happened was there was a general election in Malaysia, the third general election on May 10. So what happened was the alliance, probably for Malaysians, it's the UMNO, the MCA, and the Indian community. That one had won only 66 seats, down to 89, and it won in 1964. But they also lost Penang, failed to capture Kelantan, and came close to losing Perak, Selangor, Kedah, and Terengganu. All these are the states in Malaysia. So DAP, the opposition, reconstituted itself from the People's Action Party, PAP, and they won 13 seats when the Singapore-based party had only won in 1964. Just a little bit background for now. So PAS got 12 seats, an increase of 3, PPP won 4, an increase of 2, while the new party Gerakan won 8. So from here, I'm just stating out what actually happened and the seats and why erupted the 13 May tragedy. So moving on, the alliance were alarmed that as though they felt the government they had dominated all this while was going to collapse. And then because of this, there was a march by the Gerakan, which was mainly constituted of Chinese and Indian, to celebrate their win. And then in return of retaliate the march by the Malay, or the second march, starting from Selangor's Menteri Besar's home, Datuk Harun Idris House in Kampung Baru, they started to march and telling them that, oh, the Malays are still winning as well. So what happened was the violence actually started about 6 p.m. that day, when about 100 Malays from Gombak made their way through Sutapa, and the demonstration, they were carrying banners and shouting slogans. And soon the street clashes broke out between them and the Chinese and Indian youth. Parang, a Malaysian, like a knife, a long knife, you can say.
Sword.
Yeah. Sticks and iron pipes were used. This started because while they were demonstrating with each other, they were actually shouting racist slur and very bad words towards each other. So the Chinese was insulting the Malays, and the Malays was insulting the Chinese, vice versa. And then the Indian came in, and everybody was just shouting at each other. And then what happened in Setapak and Kampung Baru spread within hours, and the whole city was engulfed in communal rioting. And actually, between this time where they were fighting, there were few people that was actually killed. And because of this, words of what happened in Setapak and Kampung Baru spread, so the violence spread even further. And this was in May 13. So the following day, May 14, a state of emergency was declared and the parliament was suspended indefinitely. So the state of emergency is what we Malaysians call is it darurat? Darurat. So because of this darurat, there were some restrictions that you can't go out within this particular time frame and stuff like that. So because of this state of emergency, it was a good move, I would say, because the clashes were dwindled, and although it continued after May 14, they fizzled, and only after about a month, the last serious outbreak was between the Malays and Indians on June 24 in Kuala Lumpur, in which 5 people were killed. So why I would like to highlight this May 13 is because throughout Malaysian history until now, safe to say that there weren't any big violence, and this was kind of important in Malaysia because next, the official count of for the total count for the Malaysians injury was that 429 were injured, a total of 196 people died, according to the National Operation Council. But the foreign diplomats believe it was closer to 800 because not many people would have kind of jot down, went to the hospital, because if they were injured, they'll probably, if it's not serious to go to the hospital, they'll probably treat it at home. So the case might be higher. So I'm just stating out some statistics which made it why it was kind of serious, because the death of the Chinese was 143, Malays were 25, others was 28, and these were injured, Chinese were 27, Malay were 127, and others was 42. And there were other injuries that consist of died of gunshot wounds, injured by firearms, injured by other weapons, or they were arrested because of breaking curfew, and then they were charged for murder or arson. And there was actually few secret society members that were jailed at Pulau Jerajip prison without trial because they were kind of believed that they were inciting or some of the riots that happened. And then what has changed, after this 13 May was that Tun Razak, our second Prime Minister of Malaysia, set up a National Consultative Council to find ways to promote and strengthen racial harmony so that normalcy would return and the parliament restored. And then on September 21, the Tunku Abdul Rahman, our first Prime Minister, retired as Prime Minister. He was actually, as said by the news, depressed and said that the racial harmony that he had devoted so much of his political life to strengthen and had collapsed under his watch. But then the parliament convened again on February 23rd, 1971, and then Tun Razak, the second prime minister, succeeded him as the country's second prime minister. Eventually, the NOC, National Consultative Council, NOC came to an end after 21 months. So some scholars argue this showed the riots were part of a coup d'etat. Razak believed unity could only be achieved with fair distribution of wealth. The ruling Charles Malay and indigenous group were the majority but owned just 2.4% of equality. This is kind of important because this led to the National Economic Policy in 1971, and which is still, this policy has been renewed and continued to this day in Malaysia. So many are agreed that Malaysians should also treat May 13 as a lasting reminder of the danger of disregarding the Merdeka Constitution and of playing about with the sensitive custom and tradition of the country's various ethnic groups. Because this 13 May will, I think, throughout, as long as Malaysia exists, I believe 13 May would be brought up from time to time, especially during the elections, because past few years there was the recent election, there was actually this 13 May issue that has been brought up as well. So I think, yeah, this is a good date for us to remember and for me to share. That's all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. May 13th is kind of like a landmark episode in our country because Malaysia received its independence in a peaceful way from the British.
Yeah.
Unlike many colonial countries, Indonesia, India, which had to resort to a lot of physical confrontation with the British. With Malaya, it was more discourse, dialogue, that allowed, that facilitated independence to be achieved. So when we had a racial clash like this on the 13th of May 1969, it kind of like it shook the country, because this is the first time when the people of the country are fighting with each other, not verbal war, but an actual physical war, not a war, sorry, a physical confrontation. So that episode stayed with a lot of our writers. So a lot of Malaysian writers use 1969 as a watershed. So it's the context for many works of literature produced by Malaysian writers. So thank you, Jennifer, for raising that.
Oh, Doctor,
Yeah.
just like to add a little bit experience stuff, because KS Maniam, he was he was in Kedah, right? So in his series, he talked about Pekan Cina, which my grandparents stayed. So actually in the riot, like the May 13 this riot, actually there was some brief mention about Pekan Cina, how they were like defending themselves. So my grandparents was actually there. So it can just show that it's actually not that far from our generation, like my generation.
Right.
So multicultural, like all this respect should be reminded. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you very much. Ali, did you have a question?
No, Doctor, just I would like to be the next one.
Please do. Thank you.
Just let me share my slides.
It hasn't been shared yet, Ali.
Yes, Doctor, I'm trying.
Okay, cool.
Are they clear, Doctor?
Yes, yes.
So hello, Doctor. Hello, everyone. Today I'm focusing on my e-task 2 on British colonization in British Malaya in 19th century to 1957. So the north of Malaya in 1800, the Sultan of Kedah, Diyaddin Mokran Shah II, relinquishes province Wolseley to the English East India Company, EEIC. In 1806, the first newspaper in Malaysia was published in Penang. Then the General Law of England was formally introduced in Penang under the title of Charter of Justice. Then in 1807, to this charter, the current Royal Militia Police trace its roots.
Okay, just
after that,
just one correction. I'm so sorry, but just one correction. In 1806, there was no Malaysia. It wasn't created yet. So I just need to kind of correct that. Malaysia was only created 1963. So in 1806, there was no country called Malaysia. There wasn't a country at all in existence. It wasn't even a country. I just wanted to correct that part. Sometimes we forget these things, you know. So I just need to kind of, because the country was fragmented. It wasn't a one unified nation. So just to keep that in mind.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, okay, Doctor. It's clear. Then the General Law of England was formally introduced in Penang under the title of Charter of Justice. Then in 1807, to this charter, the current Royal Militia Police traces its roots. Then in 1818, the Thai Kakri Sami from Chakri dynasty lead a raid to invade Perak because its ruler did not send Bonga Mas, it means golden flower, as a symbol of subjection. Sam occupied Kedah in 1821 for the same reason. So we see that in 1821, Chakri Sam invades and occupies Kedah to the latter's insubordination, not sending the Bonga Mas, and disloyalty. Perceived friendship with Konabang Burma, Sultan Ahmed Tajuddin Halim Shah in 1797 to 1843 flees to Penang. Then troops are sent to province Wolseley to ensure that Sima's forces do not encroach on British territory. Then the Anglo-Dutch Treaty. Following a deal with the British installed Sultan Hussein Muhammad Shah of the Kingdom of Johor Raya, Sir Thomas Stanford Bengali Rifles found in EEIC outpost on the island of Singapore in 1819. Then in 1824, due to the Treaty of London, which planned to divide the Malaya archipelago, Britain put the north of the Strait of Singapore under its domination. However, the south, under the influence of Dutch, then the Johor Raya Empire divided to Johor to British and Raya to Dutch. Then the British Strait settlement included Penang, Melaka, and Singapore. It also acknowledged the sovereignty of Sam over Kedah. After that, Perak relinquished Dindings to British as an independence from Bangkok. So the Anglo-Dutch Treaty here, we see that in 24 March 1824 was signed partly to legitimize British control of Singapore and also to settle outstanding issues between the British and Dutch following the Napoleonic Wars. It effectively divided the Malaya world down the Strait of Malacca. It gave the Dutch Sumatra and the island to the south of Strait of Singapore, while the British received the Malaya Peninsula and Singapore Island. Then the east side from 1842 to 1847, Sir James Brooke, an English adventurer, was granted the title of Raja, governor of a fifth dome called Sarawak by Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin II of Brunei. Then Labuan was included to the British Crown colony with Brunei. Then in 1868, the authority of Sarawak delivered to Sir Charles Anthony Johnson Brooke after the death of James Brooke. Then in 1871 was the year of forming the Strait Settlement Police Force. Then in 1874, the Bangkok engagement established the Anglo-Malaya relation. It was the first spark of a British residential system of indirect colonial rule. Then in 1875, J.G. Davison appointed the British resident to Selangor after the assassination to Johor Woodford Willie Bridge. Then the first signs of colonization. In 1881, the Chartered Company of British North Borno received royal charter to administrate North Borno Sabah by the British Parliament. In 1885, the British acknowledged Abu Bakr as Sultan of Johor, in addition to the first railroad line connecting Taipening to Port World is established. Wan Ahmed, the Sultan of Penang, accepted J.B. Roger as a British resident to Bahang. Sarawak, Brunei, and North Borno become British protectors. In 1890, from 1891 to 1895, Abdurrahman was the leader of the first anti-British resistance, started in Bahang, that was referred to as the Samantan or Bahang Rebellion. So in 1881, the arrival of the Mill Hill Fathers brings a Roman Catholic mission to Sarawak. The first Gurdwara, the first temple, is erected in Penang for the Sikh community. Then in 1885, railways greatly contribute to the expansion and development of the tin industry of the Western Malaya states. The Mithadate mission is founded in Malaya. Then in 1888, exactly between 1855 and 1956, Henry Nicholas Riding becomes the director of Singapore's Botanical Gardens. Then Federated Malaya States. In 1894, Johor was presented with a written constitution by Sultan Abu Bakr the first, making it as a new state for a Malaya state. And then from 1895 to 1903, the big threat to the administration of Chartered Company of British North Borno is the Mat Salah Rebellion. And in 1896, witnessed the formation of the Federated Malaya States, that's called FMS, including Perak, Selangor, Negri Sembilan, and Bahang, is administered by a resident general headquartered at Kuala Lumpur and headed by the governor of the Strait Settlements. The Strait Chinese-British Association, SKBK, is established in Singapore and Malacca and later in Penang in 1920. It seeks to bring together Strait Chinese who are British citizens to promote their interests and rights. The Western Malaya state of Perak and Selangor and Negri Sembilan and Bahang also formed the Federated Malaya State, FMS, that was in 1896, which improved administrative efficiency and streamlined infrastructure development particularly in the development of land, transportation. Then a British resident general at Kuala Lumpur was overall control of the FMS, while the British governor in Singapore acted as High Commissioner of the FMS. You hear me well, Doctor?
Yeah. Ali, can I just interrupt? Can you go back to the slide before? I just want to make one statement before I forget. Just the one before. Just that statement.
This one?
Okay, yes, this is brilliant. Okay, everybody just have a look at the last two statements on this slide. What was happening in 1896 and what was happening in 1920. You see the the creeping in of ethnic based or racial based politics, you know. So you've got the 1896, the formation of the federal Malay states. Malay is an ethnic group, yeah. Chinese is an ethnic group also. And then in 1920, the association of Chinese Chinese British formation in three different parts of Malaya: south in Singapore, the central in Malacca, and up north in Penang. I'm from Penang. I'm born and brought up in Penang. I'm a Penang girl. So these three very distinct places had majority Chinese population, Chinese from mainland China who came to Malaya to work the mines, the tin mines, among other things. So you see the kind of, you see the start of race-based politics in Malaya. So I just wanted to kind of like reiterate that part. Okay, please proceed, Ali.
Okay, Tom. Then education and industry. In 1905, the Malaya College in Kuala Kangsar, Perak, which will offer an English public school education to the sons of Malaya nobility, is established. In Singapore, the King Edward VII College of Medicine is set up. Then in 1910, a director of the British North Borno Chartered Company, William Clark Cowie, proposes an upper of incentive, including an export tax moratorium, to promote large-scale rubber cultivation North Borno. Then in 1915, an anti-British Malaya peasant revolt breaks out in Kelantan, fighting against the abolition of land taxation. Then between 1934 to 1943, the abolition of the International Rubber Regulation Scheme aims at regulating rubber exports and improved prices. Malaya, as a signatory, enforces the stipulated regulation that, to a large extent, discriminate against native smallholders. So the British, Doctor here, the British implement a system of education for the indigenous Malayas, one for the Malaya peasantry and another for the Malaya nobility. The two systems of education served different purposes and needs of the British. The Malaya peasantry was provided with a rural-based Malaya education, which only had limited value in terms of educational mobility. This rural-based education was to serve as a means of social control for the British by entrapping the Malayas in semi-subsistence economy. The nobility was given an elite's English education that aimed at co-opting the ruling class into the British bureaucracy. The Malaya-educated intelligentsia became anti-British radical nationalists, contrary to the intention of the British. During the colonial period from 1870s to 1950s, the emphasis was on the production and export of tin, rubber, gold, and oil were exported from Sarawak, as well as some paper. And North Borno contributed timber cultivation of palm oil on a large scale began in earnest during the 1960s. It even occasionally replaced rubber as the crop of choice. Then, Doctor, the Japanese invasion. From 1941 to 1942, Kota Bora, Kelantan, fell in the hands of the Imperial Japanese Army, IJA. Then they captured Joslon, North Borno. The Malayan Communist Party, MCP, takes to the jungle to organize the Malayan People's Anti-Japanese Army, MPAGA, to harass the occupying Japanese forces. After the enormous explosion of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima, the Allied forces resulted in interracial clashes in Malaya, Sarawak, and North Borno. The British Military Administration, PMA, is established in Malaya, while in Sarawak and North Borno, Australian Imperial Forces, AIF, set up military administration headquartered on Labuan. Sorry, Doctor, for the Japanese invasion during World War II, are you following me, Doctor? Hello?
Yes, but this is more than what I'm asking you to do. So you've really explored Malaysian history, I'm glad to say, because I wanted you to focus only on one episode of Malaysian history. So I'm glad you've done more research than needed.
Yeah. So can I go on, Doctor, or will be enough?
I think for now this is enough. But
Okay.
you will find, Ali, when we are reading some of the novels and some of the works, you will find some of these things that you have explored, especially the Japanese invasion. When you are reading, when you explore this book, The Garden of Evening Mist, that episode of the Japanese invasion will be very, very useful. You will find that your notes will help you later on. So well done, well done.
Okay.
Can I have the next person?
Doctor, I want to go next.
Yes, Alice, please.
Okay. Doctor, can you see the slide?
Very nice. Very autumny color.
Thank you. And I want to talk about the Japanese occupation of Malaya because when I read chapter 1 of the return and after Ravi's grandmother came to Malaya and Japanese made the occupation. The Malaya was gradually occupied by Japanese between December 8, 1941 and Allied surrender at Singapore on February 16, 1942. The Japanese remained in occupation until their surrender to the Allies in 1945, and the first Japanese garrison in Malaya to lie down their armies was in Penang on September 2, 1945. Malaya was the British colony. The British maintained the Far East Command in Malaya and the Eastern Fleet to control the Far East colonies. In order to capture East Asia from the Western powers, Japan decided to attack strategically important British Malaya, both to take control of the region from the British and to expand its power, and to serve as a base for entering Dutch East India and now Indonesia. In the early hours of December 8, 1941, the Japanese suddenly and forcibly landed at Kota Bharu in Kelantan State, northern Malaya. The Malayan General Command decided to resist. The British and the Japanese fought hard into the night, and the British were defeated. As a result, the Japanese occupied the city and the airport. The Japanese continued to attack, but the British were repeatedly defeated by the Japanese for lack of enough preparation, training, and equipment. The Japanese also bombed the British bases and airfields such as Kuantan, dealing a heavy blow to British air power. Before long, the British Eastern Fleet was incapacitated, while the Japanese took control of air and sea control of Malaya. Subsequently, the Japanese along the east and west coast of the Malaya Peninsula in two rapid south advance. The British had tried unsuccessfully to stop the Japanese advance in Johor. The Japanese army, with naval cooperation, captured Kuantan on December 31st and captured Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaya, on January 11, 1942. The British army was routed and suffered heavy losses and was forced to retreat to Singapore on January 31st. At this point, the Japanese completely defeated the British forces in Malaya. From the invasion to the occupation of Malaya, a total of 55 days. During the Japanese colonial period, in order to dilute the colonial symbol of Malaya, the Japanese authorities tried to dilute the local Chinese and British culture, especially the British flag was banned. In keeping with the policy of Greater Eastern Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, the government promised the people independence of Malaya after the war and helped train the Malays to form an armed forces and government sector elite. The Japanese and the Taiwanese took over the leadership of Malayan internal affairs and police. The internal structure was similar to that of the British colonial period before the war in Malaya, but the chances of Malaya taking up higher position was improved because the British were all dismissed. Most of the laws and the rules of the British Raj continued to apply. The Japanese allowed the various sultans to continue to rule in name only. In July 1943, Japanese Prime Minister announced that Kedah, Bali, and Kelantan and Terengganu were to be returned to Thailand as part of the military alliance signed between Thailand and Japan on December 21, 1941. Thailand administered the states as Sibura, Balid, and Kelantan, and Terengganu provinces from October 18, 1943 until the surrender of the Japanese at the end of the war. Japanese troops and company continued to be stationed at the formation states. The Japanese occupation authorities changed the name of Malaya to Malay and established the military and the civil surveillance department. It has jurisdiction over 10 states. After Japan's defeat in October 1955, Japanese troops who remained in Malaya, Java, Sumatra, and Burma at the end of the war were transferred to Rimbang and Gonglong Islands from October 1945 on to await repatriation to Japan. Gonglong was renamed Sika by the troops. Lieutenant General Ishiguro was put in charge of the island by the Allies under supervision of 5 British officers. More than 200,000 Chinese troops passed through the island and Operation Exodus. The last troops left the islands in July 1946. And that's all. Thank you. If there are any mistake and advice, please tell me.
Alice, you will find that
Hi, can anyone hear me?
Yes, Ren. I think the doctor's internet had problems.
Yes.
It's good. Good.
Thank you.
Yes, dear, we heard you.
Yeah, let's wait.
Thank you. And you
Doctor
choose
to
the
come
same period I chose.
Oh.
Kind of a telepathy between us, you know, dear.
hello.
The telepathy.
Hello, doctor.
Hi. Sorry, I don't know what happened. My system just crashed. Okay, Alice, as I was saying, you will find like Ali, your notes about the Japanese occupation of Malaya and the effects and the repercussion will help inform your reading of The Garden of Evening Mist. So please keep these notes for your reading of the novel The Garden of Evening Mist. All right, so okay, who's going to go next?
May I, doctor?
Yes, Huda, go ahead.
Okay. It is the same period of, you know, Alice. So as if there is a kind of telepathy between us.
Huda, are you sharing the screen? Huda, your mic is muted. Are you sharing the screen?
Yes, I'll try, and just in case, I send it to your WhatsApp, doctor.
Yeah, to our group WhatsApp. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know if you cannot share, then I'll try to open it for you.
All right. I don't think I will. I can manage it. Sorry. Could you share it for us, doctor, if you don't mind? Hello? Hello?
We are still with you, Huda, but I think Doctor don't hear you.
I don't know. Something wrong with her net.
Oh, no, I think she's sharing.
Yes, I think so.
She's sharing now.
I try because I
Can you
but
see?
I
Can
can't.
you see it now?
Yes, doctor, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Yes, doctor.
Is it Huda's notes?
Not yet.
Not.
Okay. Is this the one?
No, it's
It's a
the
meeting
screen.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the screen of us.
Oh. Mm. Is this the one, Huda?
Yes, doctor. This is
Yeah.
the one.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, it's so slow. Okay, I am taking the years from 1941 to 1943. It is I thought it is a significant period, and there is plenty of production and literary work by many important figures such as Maniam and Samad Said and so on. So this reflects from the misery caused by the World War II and the crucial subsequences of this war, the destruction all over the world, whether it is directly by to the colonizer or it is indirectly to the colonized country, that they are innocent and they are not interested in such war. We have Malaya was gradually occupied by the Japanese between the 8th September 1941 and the Allied surrounded at Singapore on 16 February 1942. The Japanese remained in occupation until their surrender to the Allies. That means Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union in 1945. So what are the motives of Japanese invasion to Malaya? The cause of this conflict and invasion was the economic recession due to World War I and the conflicts of interest between the great powers, which divided the world into two parts: the developing countries that were occupied because of their rich natural resources, and the developed countries which had the great power that invaded nation and ruled them unjustly. Japan badly needed to capture Malaya because it had half of the world's tin and a third of its natural rubber. Initially, the decision to attack was made based on intelligence gathered by Japanese officers who had been secretly dispatched to Thailand and Malaya, disguised as commercial travelers. How did the British who were colonizing Malaya resist the Japanese invasion? Shaharum Ahmed, Malaya Historical Group researcher, states it is estimated that nearly 130,000 British troops had been captured and 8,700 men were killed or wounded throughout the entire 70-day campaign in Malaya and Singapore, while Japanese losses during this period amounted to around 10,000 battle casualties. The British troops did not stand a chance against the Japanese. The Japanese fought furiously during this invasion. During the first wave, they threw themselves over the barbed wire faces or onto landmines, dying to provide safe passage for the following wave to advance. The Japanese also outflanked the British troops and attacked the rear, effectively trapping soldiers who were in pillboxes and along defense lines located on segments of land surrounded by rivers. What are the effects of Japanese on the Malaya community? The Japanese occupied Malaya in World War II. Japanese forces attacked Singapore on December 10, 1941, and by February 15, 1941, the Japanese occupied the Malaya Peninsula and Singapore under Japanese occupation. Ethnic tension between Malays and Chinese crystallized because Malayas filled many administrative positions while the Chinese were treated harshly for their resistance activities and for supporting China's war of resistance against the Japanese in 1930s. How did Japanese manage to gain cooperation from Malaya people? The Japanese used a slogan like Simangat Asia and Asia for Asians as a propaganda to apparently liberate Southeast Asia territories from their colonizers. The Japanese has a racial policy just as the British did. They regarded the Malayas as a colonial people liberated from a British imperialist rule and fostered a limited form of Malaya nationalism, which gained them some degree of collaboration from the Malaya civil service and intellectuals. Most of the Sultan also collaborate with the Japanese, although the Japanese argued that they supported Malaya nationalism. They offended Malaya nationalism by allowing their ally, Thailand, to re-annex the four northern states, Kedah, Perlis, Kelantan, and Terengganu that had been surrendered to the British in 1909. Who stood against the Japanese? But Ibrahim Yaqub, who founded the Young Malay Union, KMM, wasn't believing the propaganda when the Japanese started occupying colonized the Southeast Asia territories, including Malaya. There have been several groups like the Indian Independence League and a Sehnes Independence Group that were working together with Japanese for their own interest, seeing how these groups were working together with Japanese. Ibrahim Yaqub through the Malayas should do something to safeguard their interest as well. KMM made its first attempt to request of Malaya independence when the Japanese entered Kuala Lumpur in January 1941. KMM's Vice President Mustafa Hussein asked Major Fujiwara Iwachi and his other officers for Japan's support to proclaim Malaya independence because Japan promised to liberate Malaya from British rule. KMM was asked to come up with a flag and an anthem to gain independence, and even after they did, Japan refused to give them their independence. Why did the Malayans cooperate with the Japanese? The loss of Malaya's export markets soon produced mass unemployment, which affected all races and made the Japanese increasingly unpopular. The Malaya nationalist Kisatuan Melayu Muda advocates of Malayo Raya collaborate with the Japanese based on understanding that Japan would unite the Dutch East Indies, Malaya and Borneo, and grant them independence. How was the economy in Malaya affected by World War II and the Japanese invasion? John H. Dribble of the University of Sydney wrote, during the Japanese occupation years of World War II, the export of primary products was limited to the relatively small amount required for the Japanese economy. This led to the abandonment of large areas of rubber and the closure of many mines, the later progressively affected by a shortage of spare parts for machinery. Business, especially those Chinese owned, were taking over and reassigned to Japanese interest. Rise on port fell heavily, and thus the population devoted a large part of their effort to producing enough food to stay alive. Large numbers of laborers, many of whom died, were conscribed to work on military projects such as construction of the Thai-Burma railroad. So that's why, Doctor, I concentrate on this period because of the Malaya were affected crucially by the subsequences of the invasion. Thank you.
Right. Well done, Huda. I like your technique of asking questions and trying to answer the questions by referring to reputable reviews of past research. This is an example of what assignment 1 will ask you to do. You know, so assignment 1, the video essay is in a nutshell asking you to do something like this, which is identify references, have topics or issues that you want to review based on those references, and do a 5-minute presentation. That's what assignment 1 is asking you to do. So I'm glad you have chosen to approach this e-task using that technique. Even though I hadn't introduced you to the technique before, but thank you so much for doing so. So asking specific questions: who stood against the Japanese? How did the Japanese gain cooperation with the Malayan people? How did the Malayan community, how were they affected by the coming of Japan? And all the other questions. So specific questions helps you target specific areas of the topic that you are interested in, and your answers are informed based on these references that you have read. That's exactly what assignment 2 will be asking you. Assignment 1 will be asking you to do. So thank you so much for that. And finally, Husna.
Thank you.
Okay.
Husna, are you there?
Yeah, wait. It's no file. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Is it? Okay, wait. Application. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Can everyone see it? Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna focus on the year 1877, where the British had brought over rubber trees in Malaysia because they've noticed that the climate of Malaysia is similar to Brazil, and Brazil
Husna,
had
Husna, sorry to interrupt. Refer to the land as Malaya.
Malaya.
Yeah, because until 63 there wasn't such a thing called Malaysia. So just kind of be more cognizant of that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Um, okay, so in the year 1877, 22 rubber plants grown at the Royal Gardens um, were smuggled out of Brazil and sent to what was what is now Singapore's botanical garden. 9 of these plants are nurtured by Sir Hugh Low, and which was a resident in Perak. So the key person of this event is H.N. Ridley because he was the researcher of rubber trees. He researched how to grow it and how to tap it and to get rubber from it. And be, and this event it impacted Malaya in 4 different ways in demographic and social structure, social relations, economics, and politics. The first one, demographic and social structure, it is a link to the importation of Indians from India to work in the rubber plantation. In the earlier years, most Indians were placed in rubber plantations, causing ethnic segregation by location and work sectors. For example, like Indians were placed in the rubber estates, and Chinese people were placed in the tin mining. This, though, elevated Malaya's multi-ethnicity status alongside other major ethnic groups in Malaya, which were uh, cons- consisted of Malay and Chinese. So um, okay. Now the population is mostly uh, the Bumiputra, which consists of the Malays, the Iban, and people like that, and which consists of 68% of Malaysia, Chinese, which is 23% of the Malaysia, and the Indians, which are 7%. Um, this event has also influenced the education system. They established the establishment of Indian-based vernacular schools, the establishment of Chinese schools, and the establishment of Malay schools. Second one is the social relations. Uh, okay. The first one is like the integration of major ethnic groups, which leads to unique ethno-linguistics spoken in this country, the type of food and clothing available and worn by the people here, celebrations and festivals. Multi-ethnicity and diversity has caused some racial tensions in Malaysia, as seen in the 13th of May in 1969 and other smaller episodes. Managing multi-ethnic Malaysia is a challenging task faced by the Malaysian administration. Most ethnic-related issues are settled through federation law and guided by our national principles. The third is through economics. Prior to the 80s, Malaysia is the leading exporter of rubber before being taken over by other neighboring countries. Now, Malaysia is still one of the major exporting rubber products countries, contributing more than 12 billion ringgit to the local economy per year. The rubber industry creates many job opportunities and contributes to many economic sectors, including transportation such as tires and health and gloves. Lastly is the political party. Okay. Since then, ethnic-based political parties such as Barisan Nasional, which is originally composed of three ethnic-based parties: UMNO, MCA, and the MIC. And the alliance among these ethnic-based party into a bigger party contributes to the social integration among Malaysians. So, in conclusion, what was originally a purely economic-based decision of bringing over rubber trees into the country had created a significant impact on the social and political landscape in Malaysia. They made an effort in the beginning to create a separation between the ethnic groups, but the social integration eventually occurred amongst these groups. In turn, this has formed a multicultural society. Okay, that is all. Thank you.
Okay, just leave the screen as it is, Husna. Thank you so much. This was really kind of example of a review work that I would expect for your first assignment. You have a beginning, you have a thesis, you have a methodology, how you want to discuss this thesis. You've got four themes you are looking at. Then you have the middle where you show us illustrations based on these four themes. And then you have the end, you've got the conclusion. So for assignment 1, you need to identify references about Malaysian literature in English. For this e-task, you looked at sociological, historical articles, right? Even cultural articles. You looked at books, references in history of Malaysia and all that. But it's the same principle. Conducting literature review is the same principle. When you read these references, in your mind, you've got all these data, but how do you present the data to your audience? You decide the methodology. Husna, can you go back to your first slide?
This one?
The one that has the 4 themes.
Okay.
Yeah, this one. So this is the methodology of this presentation. And the thesis is the impact of rubber industry on Malaya, focusing primarily Malaya/Malaysia, because you're right to put Malaysia there because you go from colonial times to the present 21st century Malaysia. So I would put Malaya/Malaysia, which means you've got 2 different contexts, 2 different historical contexts, right? So this slide captures the thesis statement. What is the thesis of this presentation? You are studying the impact of the rubber industry on the country. How are you going to do that? What's the methodology? By focusing on 4 different areas of society, right? Or areas of social growth: the demographic, social structure, the social relations, economics, and the politics. Okay? So this is so if you combine Huda's questioning technique with Husna's structured presentation of having an introduction, a middle, and an end, having a methodology, having a thesis, that's what assignment 1 will be asking you to do. But the difference is the reference will be on Malaysian literature in English, not Malaysian history. Are you getting that so far, all of you?
Yes.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, cool. All right. So thank you so much. Can I have the screen back?
Okay.
Thank you. Well done, all of you. Well done. Just another half an hour before I know it's quite heavy today, but just a little bit more. Where am I? This one. Okay. So that was the e-task, and the e-task helps you discover that when I'm reading a literary work of Malaysia, I need to make time to probe into the history of the country, right? In order for me to be able to read the literature produced by writers from that country with more information. That's the purpose of the e-task, okay? So moving on. So this notion of the Malayan history, of you've covered the coming of the British, the separation of parts of the land amongst the British and the Dutch, right? Indonesia was taken over by the Dutch. Malaya and parts of the Borneo island was taken up by British. And you also talked about, one of you also talked about the mining of tins by the Chinese laborers coming from China. You didn't go into it in detail. Then the rubber, the planting of rubber in Singapore and later different parts of the Malayan Peninsula. And also an important episode of that legacy, of that colonial legacy. I need you to kind of keep in mind, this is the colonial heritage that this nation called Malaysia has inherited from the British. This construct called plural society. This is a construct coined by J.S. Furnival, an imperialist in the British colonial, government back during colonial times. But the definition of plural society needs to be understood. So what happened was this predominantly homogeneous landscape. Malaya was not completely monocultural. It wasn't. It was predominantly homogeneous, right? Predominantly, more so. Meaning there were other tribes, indigenous populations, but predominantly it was homogeneous. It was ruled by the Malay sultanates. Okay, that homogeneous land underwent a very strong, very stark, heterogeneous facelift during colonial times. So it's the colonial rule that created the heterogeneity of the land. So that's one of our heritage. Meaning to say, it's because of the British that Malaya became multi-ethnic, later multicultural. Right? So prior to that, it was more monocultural, not completely, it was predominantly more homogeneous. Okay, we had traders coming from the Arab Peninsula, we had traders coming from the Indian subcontinent, we had traders coming from China. They would trade in Malacca, for instance. They will trade, but they go back their separate ways. They do not make Malacca and this land, Singapore, Malacca, and parts of the Malay Peninsula, they didn't make this their home. So they would come, they would trade, they would. That's part of their occupation. But colonial rule changed that dramatically. When I mean colonial, is the British. Okay, so the British changed the landscape of this land. That's one of the effects of colonial rule. Okay, so this is something I want you to kind of keep in mind. So this notion of plural society, I want to kind of go into it a little bit, and then I will leave it there. Next week, we will continue with K.S. Maniam's novel. But I need you to understand the concept called plural society. So this notion of plural society, what is the definition of plural society? You may look at the word plural. Oops, sorry. Just a second, huh? If you've got three, can you see the circles that I'm drawing here?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, this is what happens when you have you know, different groups living together. Maybe you have group A and then group B and then group C. Group A and B, at times they mix. Maybe they go to the same school or they work at the same institution. So there are times when they mix. Then group B and C, there are times that they mix also. Group A and C also, there are times that they mix, meaning they do interact with each other. And all three groups also mix sometimes. All three groups. Okay? Maybe they share something in common. So all three of them meet once in a while. But predominantly, if you look at this diagram, these three groups, predominantly, they each have their own space. They each live in their own space. Okay, so generally speaking, this kind of society, they live in their own pocket. All right, they live in their own pocket, but they mix at times with one another, with everybody. All right, so this is a more multi-ethnic stroke multicultural kind of a society. This kind of a society, right? This mapping of the society. So this is more multi-ethnic, moving towards multicultural. Okay. Now, what about plural society that J.S. Furnival describes? What is that like? So, plural society that Furnival describes plural society that J.S. Furnival describes is more like this, where each group lives in their own pockets. You've got group A, group B, group C. They live in their own pockets, but they meet. Sometimes they meet, okay? Sometimes they meet in the marketplace. So they might come, trade with each other. They might come, trade with each other, and then they go back. Right? This is what is called plural society that J.S. Furnival constructed. So this is a construct, okay? But this is what was happening in Malaya during the time of the British. I think Alice, in her presentation, talks about education, about how the rural Malay, I could be wrong, the rural Malays were taught certain things, the royalty from the Malay community were taught certain things. That kind of use of education to separate members of society, this was a strategy done by the British called divide and rule. So they separated the members of society. It wasn't a society. There wasn't something called an imagined society. If I asked Huda and Ali, do they feel that they both belong to the same nation? Most probably they say they will, because they speak the same language, they have they share the same culture, same religion, they have similar features. So Benedict Anderson coined this construct called imagined society. So for members of a land or a nation, they need to have that sense that they are part of one another. They feel like they belong to one another. So in a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, this concept of imagined society is available. It's real, because people from the different groups share certain things with each other. Like I said here, maybe they share maybe their children go to the same school, or maybe they go to the same hospital for medical attention. Maybe they work in the same place. So group A and group C, you know, they go to the same school, maybe they even go to the same religious institution, same temple or same church or same mosque, but they live in different parts of the country. They're not living together. That means group A and group C, they don't all live together. Okay. Similarly, group A with group B, and similarly for group C and group B. Do you get what I'm saying so far?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah.
Yes, doctor.
But in plural society, that was not the case. Each community lived away from each other. So if you are a member of group A, you have no knowledge of people from group C or B unless you go to the marketplace and you meet them, unless you trade with them, unless there is a reason for you to go out of your land or your space to meet them. You will never meet them, and you will only know them based on what other people say about them. Okay, so I need to visualize this for you, so that when you are reading the return, you get a sense of what this thing called plural society is really about. You understand this concept. Because the return, this novel is very much set in this kind of a context, in this context called plural society. Okay? Are you all right so far?
Doctor?
Yes,
Yes,
doctor.
I have a question.
Yes, who's that?
Jennifer.
Jen, hi.
I initially thought that in KS Manyang, the society we lived in is really considered multi-ethnic, because he mentioned that the school that he attended had Chinese, Malay, and Indian students as well. So that's still considered pro society. I mean, after his parents managed to move his laundry business to the streets, and there were like people selling, vendors. So all those are still considered as a pro society where there's a market, is it? It's not considered multi-ethnic yet?
They still had to travel outside of their space. They still had to travel outside of the estates. It wasn't in the estates. And that's the conflict that the character in this book, that's the conflict that Ravi faces, because he leaves the estate. He doesn't stay within his community. So within the estates, it's predominantly the Indians. That's the ethnic group, because the Indians were brought to the rubber estates.
I see.
Right? So in order to do that, in order to meet people from other communities to go to an English school, you would have to leave the estates for that, because within the estates is an Indian school with the curriculum from India, with teachers coming from India. Same with the Chinese mining cities or townships. The schooling, the education, the teachers came from mainland China.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right.
The British did not do anything to promote a more unified education for all the groups. The British did not do enough to bring the people together. So this is this notion of divide and rule. They ruled the land by making everyone feel that they are not part of each other. So this notion of imagined society was not available during the time of British. So this was a political strategy to ensure that the people in the land didn't feel a kind of camaraderie, sense of belonging to each other, because it's easier to separate them, it's easier to rule if they each thought of the other as a foreigner. Imagine all 5 of you, if I did not have a class like this, where you got to hear, oh, this is what Alice sounds like, this is what Huda sounds like, this is what Ali sounds like, this is what Husna sounds like, this is what Jennifer sounds like. Imagine you don't get to hear these voices. In your mind, I'm alone in this class, right? In your mind, I don't have anybody else in this class to support me. That's exactly how, that's the analogy, that's exactly how the plural society was. Because without your own people, you feel like there isn't anybody else in this land. This land is made out of people like me, and that's it. Because I don't know anyone else who does not look like me. So when in the return, you will, next week when we discuss that, Miss Nancy, the English school teacher, makes Ravi feels like he is a discovery to himself, like he feels curious to know more about himself, because she makes him feel like there's more to him than what others say of him. Because in the estates, he is from the lower caste. His father is a dobi, meaning he works the laundry. The father works the laundry. So in the caste system, it's the lower caste. It's like the lower class of the society, right? And he wants to go and educate himself. He wants to study in English school. All this, usually it's of the upper class. Okay, so all this is within the Indian community. There isn't any other member of any other community in this society here. Are you following me so far?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes.
Yes, Doctor. Okay, Jen, does that answer your question?
Yep, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So back to the slides, just a few more before we stop, and we'll resume next week. So the definition of plural society, that it's a construct, we started off talking about a construct. So I want to keep thinking in these terms, this is a construct, meaning you can always change this if the demographic is different. But right now, this is the demographic. Different ethnic community living side by side in a single political unit with little interaction except at the marketplace. So you can ask yourself, why at the marketplace? Why is the marketplace, why is it like a special space? One of the things you have to think about is we trade with each other based on what we produce, as well as based on what the other produces that we want to purchase. So marketplace is the most convenient. Other than that, in a plural society, in terms of social, political, economic, education, religion, all within the ethnic group provides for it. You don't need anybody else to provide for you. So like you may fish, you may be a fisherman, or you may be a farmer, but you want the produce of the other group as well. You may grow vegetables, but maybe you don't plant, maybe you don't have paddy, you don't have rice. or maybe you fish, but you don't rear chicken and goats and cows and whatever. So you trade with each other for the things that the other community may be able to produce or may be able to offer you. So that's why the marketplace is super crucial for that. So another thing, another colonial legacy that I want you to kind of keep in mind is that the colonialists, and this was done in a very calculated manner. The colonialists, i.e. the British, encouraged people to think like they are separate from each other, to retain their social, cultural, political link of the motherland. This is something the colonialists encouraged. They didn't discourage. They didn't say, you know, think of Malaya as your home, you know, disconnect from your ancestral land. Think of this place as your home. No, they in fact encouraged the immigrants to consider India and China as the motherland. And that is another legacy that continues to affect race relations in Malaysia, even in the 21st century. You know, Jennifer talked about the May 69 riot, the between Chinese and Indian and the Malays. The Malays look back then. The Malays look at the Indians and the Chinese as migrant, meaning you're not part of this land. You migrated to this land, and because of the British policy of encouraging the Chinese and the Indians to continuously develop strong ties, social ties, cultural ties, political ties with mainland China and Indian subcontinent, this legacy remained for the longest time amongst the migrant communities. And you see this in Malaysian literature as well. So a critique, Fenton talks about this. He says, and I quote, "The shape of pre- and post-independence politics was to bring ethnic identity into the foreground of politics, reflecting the fact that the British, as colonial rulers, had, as many have argued, created colonial Malaya as an ethnicized state." This notion of plural society. So Malaya is not a unified state, but Malaya is a state based on ethnic identities. And this is a legacy of the British. So what's the effects? And this is where literature can be used to kind of probe it further. What are some of the effects of plural society? Some of the effects include the lack of interaction between communities. So each community had a very ethnocentric perspective of the world. If I am Chinese, I see the world only from my Chinese perspective, my Chinese culture, my Chinese religion, my Chinese language, my Chinese worldview. If I'm Indian, likewise. If I'm Malay, likewise. If I'm whatever my ethnicity is, the perspective of my world is based on that. And I want to read you a little bit from chapter 1. If you have the return with you, please open to chapter 1. I'm looking for the bit when he talks about how this land of this Bidong, this town that they were from. I cannot find it now. Okay, page 6, if you have, top of page 6. Can you all, do you have a copy of the book?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, top of the page, this is the statement. In chapter 1, Maniam talks about the grandmother, Priyatai, how she came from India as a single mom, and she brought her sons and raised the sons and took care of her sons until she died. And Ravi is the grandson, the character Ravi, the protagonist of the story. And this is how Priyatai's character is described, how she led her life in Malaya. It was a re-immersion, a recreating of the thick spiritual and domestic air she must have breathed there, back in some remote district in India. So this character called Priyatai brought an aspect of India to Malaya and recreated it in this new land that they lived. And that was a kind of a symbol of what the ethnocentric perspective was, of how the migrants approached being part of Malaya, bringing in aspects of the culture, the history, the language, even the associations in China, the group associations, brought it back to Malaya and lived as if this was an extension of China, an extension of India. So the effects of that was there wasn't any intercultural dynamics, and people started to live and separated from each other and had a very compartmentalized mindset where they looked at their life mainly from their perspective. So if you are a non-Malay and I am a Malay, I look at you as a foreigner and you look at me as a foreigner. So I don't look at each other, we don't look at each other as if we are part of something united. So that also connects it to this notion of a lack of common will. When you are fighting for something, you must feel that you are fighting for it together. There is a shared value that we have with each other, that we are fighting for a common good, for something that we both want. There wasn't that either. And this segregated existence, this self-sufficient need, so it's like the Chinese felt they were self-sufficient, they didn't need people from other communities. The Indians felt the same, the Malays felt the same. And because of that, their children were raised in a way that showed they are separate from each other. And because of that also, the need to come together, the need to work together in order to defeat the British was almost nil. It wasn't there. So some of the historical episodes that some of you talked about, how the Chinese from the Penang, Malacca, and Singapore formed an association. Do you notice it is still the same ethnic group? And then the Malay sultanates, they came together and formed a kind of an association to kind of fight the British for independence. It was still the same ethnic group, right? So this notion of plural society continues to stay with the country even today. Even today, our politics is really ethnic-based politics. You know, it's not a multicultural-based politics. It's still based on ethnic group. You are of that ethnic group, so you're part of that political group. Are you all right so far?
Yes, doctor.
Okay.
Yes,
And
doctor.
Yes,
now
doctor.
we're coming into the theory part. So one of the consequence is this idea of seeing each other from a stereotypical point of view, or what Homi Bhabha talks about, this notion of fixity. So I see this person based on my stereotypes, based on my rigid, unchanging opinion about this person, because I don't know this person, right? So hence you have the stereotypes. So other historians like Jim Baker talked about this as well, and argued that the British failed to do something significant. They failed to realize, and I quote, the need for schools to promote a Malayan outlook, that is to foster amongst Chinese youth that Malaya was their home. So this idea of home is also another important theme in Malaysian literature in English. So where is home? You know, is home mainland China or Malaya? If your culture, your politics, your economy, your education comes back from mainland China, why would you consider Malaya your home? Do you understand? So this is an issue, you know. This is something that we will also be discussing, including in the return. Okay, so I just want to stop there, and you know, if you've got any questions, please ask. Do you have any questions for me?
So far, okay, doctor.
So now is everything okay, doctor?
I'm okay, doctor.
Can we continue a little bit more?
I'm okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
Doctor,
I'm okay.
Ken?
May I have a question?
if you don't mind, Doctor.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. As for the return, we can see in all the works of K.S. Maniam, he is self-interrogation. There is self-interrogation about himself. So he resort to, you know, education to bridge this gap between him and the other ethnic groups. So if I may concentrate on this regarding what you have said.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So it will be the plural society that keeps him away, because even when he began to, you know, be educated, and he was mastering English language, that was, they were called him the white monkey in his own community or society. And as for education, he neglected the idea of his father and grandmother to have or to own their own home. They couldn't do it until they died. Both of them died. So he, as if was a trigger for him to concentrate on education, to be superior by adopting this method. So can I use it in my literature review?
No, save it for second assignment. Save it for assignment 2. Assignment 2 allows you to choose any Malaysian text and do a critical review or a critical reading of the text. So yes, absolutely. So the context is the same, plural society, but the issue that you want to talk about vis-a-vis the return for Huda, you want to talk about education. So you're looking at how education in the context of plural society, how it affected both, you're talking about conflicts, huh? You're talking about conflicts within the character.
Yes.
Within Ravi and between Ravi and the other characters, the other Indians in his estate. Yeah, this is the methodology and this is the thesis. So this is your presentation for assignment 2 if you want to do that. But next week, when we discuss the return, you can begin to explore this issue, share with us some of your ideas and thoughts, get feedback, put it all together for your second assignment, if you want. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, doctor. I have to define this plural society.
You continue to share your thoughts, your ideas and your thoughts, and get more feedback, get more thoughts from us, from the rest of us, and then what's wrong with this thing? And then you can finally put it together for your assignment. But for assignment 2, for assignment 1, it doesn't require original research. Okay? Assignment 1, I need you to look at, okay, let me share the screen first. I need you to look at previous research done in this area, or this corpus called Malaysian literature in English. So a simple research, Google research, if I just Googled critical studies on Malaysian literature in English, you've got this article, interrogating Malaysian literature in English, exploring Malaysian literature in English. You've got various journal articles, significance of Malaysian literature in English, Malaysian literature in English, a critical companion, multiple literary identities in contemporary Malaysian literature in English. So there are many journal articles that probes on this topic. One specific journal that has special issues on this is Asiatic, Journal of English Language and Linguistics. English Language and Literature, and they have a special issue on Malaysian literature in English archive. They have a special issue somewhere there. Special issue on 21st century Malaysian literature. So you may just take 1 or 2 articles, whatever you're interested in. And if you are interested in Tan Tuan In, the other writer, this one, from Garden of Evening Mist, you may review that. Another way of looking at it is just Google for K.S. Maniam's works, and the kind of criticisms, the kind of critical work that has been done on K.S. Maniam's writing. And another place to look for it is Google Scholar. Google Scholar is specifically for academic publications. So maybe you are interested in Malaysian literature in English. So these are some of the journal articles. You can get any of these, you know, so from 2000, 2008, 2009, 2003, 2003, 2006. This is my own work, 2011, 2016, children's literature, 2006. So any of these articles, you may choose to review them for first assignment, for assignment number 1. So just to reiterate, assignment 1, what you need to do, assignment 1, what you need to do is conduct a review of literature in the area of Malaysian literary canon. Choose one topic. Maybe you want to talk about the topic of identity formation in Malaysian literature in English, and you want to look at it from the plural society point of view and the effect of the plural society on Malaysian landscape and how that plural society continues to show itself in the Malaysian literatures, right? You may do that. Or you may say, I want to do a review of past research done on one writer, one Malaysian writer, like K.S. Maniam. You may do that as well. But next week, I want you to kind of share with me what are your suggestions or what it is that you are trying to do for assignment 1 for the video essay. But a simple thing would be to read these articles and to review them for the issues that you are interested in. For instance, this notion of national identity. What is this notion of national identity? What does it mean? And how does Malaysian literature in English for children describes national identity? You can review C.M. Desai's article, this one. Or maybe you are interested in looking at the issue of home. And like I said, you know, this concept of home is very, very an important theme in Malaysian writing. Maybe you want to read this article and see how this author Tay, 2011, talks about this notion of home in Malaysian literature. So ignore the Singapore part, this one, ignore that. Just focus only on the Malaysian literature part in this book. Okay, any questions?
So far, okay with this.
Sorry, Doctor. So the first assignment will be next week, just like a video assignment.
No, first assignment is not next week because we missed last week. I'm going to push it one more week. But next week is like consultation. After lecture, you may continue to stay on and ask me questions, right? If you have any suggestions, okay, this is what I'm planning to do for my assignment. What do you think? Is this okay? You can consult with me either before class or after class. For those in Malaysia and in China, you can consult with me before class, right? Before the 2 o'clock class. Huda and Ali, because you will be joining us fairly early in your country, you can consult with me after class. Meaning share with me what you're planning to do, and I will guide you whether you are on the right track or not. Okay, Huda, you put up your hand. Yes. Huda, go ahead.
No, doctor, thank you. It's clear. I just want to to remove this icon.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Ali, is that all right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, doctor. But so then next week will be just the analysis of the return, KS minimum, right?
Yes, next week is a continuation of today's lecture. Today's lecture was just the context of plural society. So next week, we will go into the return in more detail. And then I want to hear your thoughts about your initial thoughts about this novel. Okay. And then we will talk about your assignment 1.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Doctor, the video essay should be within 5 minutes or 25 minutes.
I would say 10 minutes or so, because you know when the video essay is within 10-15 minutes, I forget what did I say in the, I just follow the structure.
Doctor, you say in structure from 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then yeah.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Yes, 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. But you will find that, you know, 15 to 20 minutes is very long. So you know, I leave it to you. But for a proper thesis, for a proper review of literature, 10 to 15 minutes is a good range.
Mm-hmm. So it will be okay if it make 10 minutes.
Yeah. Anyone has any questions?
Sorry, doctor, just last question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
That will be at any week exactly, the video
The
assignment.
week after, not next week, but the week after. Week 6.
Sorry, doctor. The next week we just talk in general about return in general.
I have not finished the lecture for this topic. This topic is supposed to do it over 2 weeks because we missed last week's class. The topic is supposed to be week 3 and week 4. Now we are in week 4, so the topic will be covered for week 4 and week 5.
Okay.
So we will discuss. That means we haven't started discussing the return. We've only started discussing the context, the historical, sociological, even economic context of Malaya. The actual reading of this novel of the return, we will only begin to do that next week.
Okay, doctor.
Which means you have time to finish reading.
Okay, we don't have task, e-task or
No.
okay. Thank you.
No e-task. So far, you've done 2 e-tasks. I gave you a task last week, a tutorial task last week, which is to develop your opinion about the return. That you can make into your assignment 2. So I will teach you how to go, whatever task I give you, I will teach you how to use it for any of your assignments. Okay. So it's not wasted. That's the first. The second is for next week's task, Jennifer, I see you, I'll get to you. For next week's task is to prepare for assignment 1.
Okay, doctor, thank you.
Jen, go ahead.
Doctor, I was wondering for assignment 2, I know KS Maniam is the main book we are reading. So let's just say that for assignment 2, I would like to choose other novels or short story. Is it possible?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to put our non-Malaysian friends at a disadvantage. You know, initially this assignment, you were supposed to like try to read broadly and find authors. Even your final project, the same thing. But because number one, they are away from the country, they're not able to just. My plan was when I conducted this course last year, 1 year ago.
Yes.
The students had to actually go to the bookstores, look for Malaysian writings, purchase their own texts, you know. So
Yes.
that kind of like allowed you to go to the bookstores to see the kind of books available by Malaysian writings, by Malaysian writers, to look at the writings and kind of like read a little bit, like, oh, these are the things I'm interested in, to explore more than what we do in class. But because Huda, Ali, and Alice are away from Malaysia, I don't want to disadvantage them. However, if Jennifer and Husna, if you all want to do, maybe you have certain writers in mind that you are interested in, we are not covering those writers, go ahead and do it.
Okay. But I think I have to discuss with you, Doctor.
Yeah. Assignment 2 is like week 9. It's supposed to be
Okay.
week 8, but we're pushing it by one more week, so it's week 9. So it's long. It's after mid-semester break. So we have time. We'll do a lot more text between now and then.
Okay.
We're starting with a major one because this is an important text and it sets the tone of this canon called Malaysian Literature in English. So we're starting with a novel. So after this, we'll be doing poems and short stories just to kind of show the range of writings. Assignment 2, you may choose to do any writings that you want, but I'm just suggesting to Huda because she gave a theme and it's very useful, but it's not useful for assignment 1, Huda. That's I didn't want to confuse everybody. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
A good
Yes,
question.
doctor. It's clear. Thank you.
Okay, and any other question? Husna, are you all right?
I'm all right. No questions.
Can you very quickly, each one of you, can you very quickly recap for me what are some of the things we covered? I hope you took notes. Can you just have a look at your notes and tell me some of the things that, just one or two things each, what you got from today's class, and then we'll end.
Okay, so for me, I kind of like finally, it's clear cut, like in KS Menu Story, like I asked you just now, Doctor, the difference between plural society and multi-ethnic society. Because at first, maybe I'm like in Malaysia, so to me, I thought it was already a multi-ethnic society after independence. So it's stuck in my brain. So I was reading it, I was like, oh, okay, we're in a multi-ethnic society. So just now when you talk about plural society, I was like, oh, okay, I think I got the concept wrong. So to me, this stuck most to me for this lesson.
Jen, just to give you an example. Okay, Husna, where are you staying?
In Bangi.
Bangi. Okay. Now, for our friends, for Ali, for Huda, for Alice, Jen, just describe to me Subang Jaya or USG. You're staying in Subang Jaya or USG?
Yes, so you USJ.
I'm in USJ 6. Jennifer is in USJ 3.
3, yes, USJ 3.
Tell me the demographics. Tell me the ethnic makeup of USJ stroke Subang Jaya.
Oh, to me, I don't really think there is a racial. I mean, even to say like in ethnic wise division, I don't think so because let's say around my residence area, like the road, the street that I'm living, my neighbors are Chinese and my another opposite of me is Malay, and then the one in front of me is Indian. So it was like everybody's together. So if we go to Mama, there is everybody there. So to me,
Mama is an Indian
sorry.
Muslim restaurant, the Indian Muslim restaurant. So at the Indian Muslim restaurant, who would go and buy food there?
Everyone, it's not inclusive. Like let's say it's not like in the story in KS Manu, like oh this is the Indian estate and like how the Indian will go here for their lunch or dinner, but for this place everybody would be like all around. Even if you go to a like say 7-Eleven, the cashier is Malay and then there is Chinese and Indian customers, like everyone is together. So yeah, in that sense I think it's a multi-ethnic society
In Subang Jaya
in
stroke
Subang.
USJ.
Yes.
Husna, what about Bangi?
I think like probably like 90% of the population is Malay.
Yep. So where UKM is, when I first moved to Bangi in 1995, it was, I would say, 99% Malay. I'm not a Malay. So I come from Penang, like I said, you know, and Penang is very much like Jen. Penang is exactly like USJ, except it's a small island, you know. So my neighbors were Indian, and this side was Malay, and the other side was Punjabi, and like, you know, it's that kind. And so when we have Chinese New Year, we will all celebrate. When we have the Deepavali, we will all celebrate. When we have Christmas, we will celebrate. When we have Islamic celebrations, Hari Raya and all that, we will celebrate. So it's a kind of a normal thing. Whereas Bangi, where UKM, where our university is based, it's, I would say 90%. I agree with Husna. I would say 90%, if not more, is Malay population. So it's very monocultural. And the 10%, the other 10%, majority of which are student population. So the international students, the Malaysian students from other parts of the country who are living near university, they also make up the 10%. So that's a huge difference between Bangi, where UKM, where our university is, and where I live. I live about 45 kilometers away from the university, slightly north, and Jennifer's also near my place. So where we live, like I live in a condo, in a condominium, high-rise condominium, not very high-rise, like 16 stories only. Like I go into the lift, my neighbors are Malays, sometimes there's Chinese neighbors, there's Malay neighbors, there are expats from India, there are you know, foreigners, expats from Japan. So it's a very cosmopolitan makeup. But when I lived in Bangi, the first year, I only lasted for 1 year. After that, I couldn't tahan already. When I lived in Bangi, it was like, I felt like I couldn't find anybody else who looked like me. You know? So there is that idea of plural society there, where we live side by side, but we don't mix with each other enough. We mix with each other only at certain times. And that was 1990s, towards the end of the 20th century. So I had huge culture shock, you know, because I came from a very multicultural society. So I want you all to kind of think about that aspect of Jennifer's Malaysia and Husna's Malaysia and Raihana's Malaysia is not all the same. You know, each of us have our own social reality, our everyday social reality. Like for lunch just now, I went to this Malay place. My husband and I went to this Malay place, and my cat went to this Malay place and bought soto. Soto is like chicken broth with vermicelli, with noodles. It's a very quintessential Malay dish. So it's like, what we eat is not, oh, I'm a person of this background, I have to eat only things from this society's meals, you know. It's not like that. And we eat each other's dishes as long, for us, it's as long as it's halal, we can eat from each other's cooking and all. And we enjoy each other's cultures, part of each other's cultures, even language-wise. There will be a poem I will be sharing for class where you may use other people's vernacular, other ethnic groups' language and words, and that's what makes Malaysia very culturally very rich. You will find that in Maniam's book. You will also find that in Tan Tuan Eng's novels, as well as other stories by Malaysian writers. So with regards to cultural diversity, Malaysian writers' sense of social reality is based on the individuals. So one writer's social reality is different from another writer's social reality. So that's why the construct called author-defined social reality that I started the class with at the beginning, in the first week, and then the second week, and then now, is very, very important. It will be the thread that we will continuously focus on even until the end of semester. You know, so I want you to kind of keep that in mind, that just because my opinion of Malaysia is like this, it doesn't mean my other Malaysian friends in the class will share the same, because their reality is different. Do you understand?
Okay, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Yes,
It's
So,
okay.
so
Clear.
Huda, Ali, and especially Alice, because she's never been to Malaysia yet. So, you know, you are having to imagine all this based on what you're reading, maybe based on what you're researching. Maybe there are videos online. But until and unless you come here and you experience it for yourself and you travel the country a little bit, then you realize, wow, you go to this part of the country, it's predominantly this community. And then you go to this other part of the country, you see people, you see foreigners, you see Americans and British and Canadians and lots of expats, you see a lot of Middle Easterns. And then you go to this other part of the country and you see another group of Malaysians. It's like they all look different. It's not like China, where you travel everywhere and you see people of the same cultural background. Their features are the same. You know, they look the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the Middle East, almost the same. In the Middle East, also the same. You travel to different parts. You go to Jordan, and then you go to Iraq, and you know, it's the Arabs. Maybe there are, like, the Kurds will be slightly different, but predominantly it's the same, right? But then you come to Malaysia, you travel around, and everybody looks like different. So what is Malaysia? What do Malaysians look like? Do they look like Jennifer or Husna or Raihana? It's a different landscape. So this is something I want you to kind of, it's the beauty of it is appreciated by Malaysian authors in a different way. Okay, so I need you to kind of have that in mind. So it's not the same like reading British literature or Australian literature or American literature, where the majority writers and writings focus on the same community. With Malaysian literature in English, every minority group is given a representation. So every writing, so you've got an Indian Malaysian, you've got a Chinese Malaysian, and in the coming weeks, I will introduce you to Malay Malaysian and people from other ethnic group, Punjabi Malaysian, and all the other ethnic groups. So I just want to end today's class with that sense of, it's difficult to homogenize, to create one identity called Malaysia, but the beauty is, because it's very diverse, every text that you read gives you a different color of this land. Okay, was that all right?
Okay, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. And because of this because of this diversity, doctor, it make Malaysia is more important and very beautiful for everyone that visits or just hear about Malaysia.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. But you will also see, because of the diversity, politically, it's a very difficult country to rule over, because politically every community wants their rights kept, or their language, their culture, their religion, their way of life, their choices addressed or recognized. So it's very challenging, and because of that challenge, more concerns and more issues are being raised by Malaysian writers. So it makes for a very interesting study. So I hope your assignment 1, 2, and 3, I hope you will use it to explore things that you are interested in. For instance, if you are interested in the issue of gender, you can use Malaysian literatures in English. I can introduce you to some writers and I can say, maybe you'll be interested in this. Or if you are interested in the issue of psychology, internal conflicts, depression, there are writers who write about that, Malaysian writers in English. If you are interested in the diasporic identity, Malaysians who are living outside Malaysia, who are writing about Malaysia from America or from Britain or from Europe or from Australia, you can explore that for your final assignment. So I want you to kind of like over the next few weeks, share with me the things that you are interested in, and I will match you with the right kind of writers or texts. So you need to tell me the things that you are interested in. So the e-task, the tutorial task that I give allows me to kind of gauge, okay, Huda is interested in this, Husna is interested in that, Ali is interested in this part, and Alice is doing that, she's interested in that, and Jen's interested. So I want to see each one of you as individuals rather than treat you as one and expect all of you to do the same thing. I want each of you to have your interests taken care of through the assignments that I ask you to do. So that's how I will conduct this course. I hope that's all right.
Okay, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay,
Doctor.
Doctor.
All right.
All right. So it's been a very long class. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Doctor.
Hopefully
Okay.
next week's
Thank you,
class
Doctor.
will be more hands-on. You will share your thoughts, and I will probe you with regards to the return. So please do finish the novel if you haven't. Have some opinions, develop some ideas about what this novel means to you. Identify some excerpts, certain pages in the novel that you are interested. Maybe you don't have the answer. Maybe you want to ask questions. What does this part mean? Why is this writer writing it this way? What does this mean? You can probe, you can ask questions, and then we will try to kind of answer it together next week. Okay?
Okay, Doctor.
Okay,
Okay,
Doctor.
Doctor.
All right. Thank you
That
so
will be great
much.
working with you.
Thank you so much. Take care and stay safe. Inshallah, I will see you next Thursday. If you have any questions regarding any of the things we've discussed today, please WhatsApp me.
Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Doctor.
thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,
Okay,
Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Doctor. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye,
Meet you
everyone.
next week,
Bye,
Take
inshallah.
Doctor.
care.